Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from onsip.com, and you can go to getonsip.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about zipdx.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from voxbone.com. Hey everybody, welcome to VUC 618, November 4th, 2016. And we're going to be talking to Ken Dixon from Yonomi. And I'm going to thank Michael right in advance for bringing this to our attention. And maybe he has somebody else to thank. And then he's going to introduce Kent, and we're going to start the session. So here we go. Michael, go for it.
Well, hello, everybody, and hello, Kent. It's good to meet you. I'm going to borrow a line from NPR's Car Talk. None of our staff have been in contact before, right? This is our first encounter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
I'm going to forego my usual little pre-story that says, you know, why I became interested in this and came to know your company and product. I will say I've been using it for a little bit. But before we get into that, we always ask all of our guests about their origins in technology, because at least for the moment, people are an important part of technology, and we'd like to know how you got into it and sort of what's the pre-story to Yonomi, and how did you come to be where you are?
Well, it's a long story. I'll make it brief. I actually am a wayward aerospace engineer. To talk about my origins in technology. Studied aerospace engineering and worked at a NASA contractor out of college, but quickly got interested in software, realizing that you could innovate much faster with things that are soft and not hard, and things that didn't have to actually go and launch into orbit. I went about kind of working in software. I've done a number of startups. This is the fourth software startup that I've been involved in. And really the most tangible part of the pre-story to Yonomi is that I was CTO of a company called Tendril, starting back in 2008. And we had a big vision for the connected home. The smart home meets the smart grid. And that we could essentially change the way that consumers consumed energy, still be able to keep them very comfortable, but massively reduce the energy footprint. And it was a big vision that involved actually making devices, hard things, once again, like thermostats and switches, and even displays that would sit on your countertop and tell you in real time how much energy you were using. It involved cloud computing to take in lots of real-time data streams and run algorithms against them and come up with optimizations for the smart home. So it was a great vision, some of which lives on today, but I would say that we didn't really realize the whole vision for a variety of reasons. I think the energy market was probably not quite ready for what we were doing. But indirectly, then that led me to say, you know, the real I should say me and my co-founders came up with this notion that the real value around smart home, or the way that you engage users around that, are things that they can tangibly experience on a day-to-day basis. You know, energy at the end of the day is important to all of us, but it's invisible. We don't see it often until the end of the month when we get our bills, and the bills actually in many cases aren't that high. But the things that we experience every day are comfort, convenience, and the satisfaction of kind of being taken care of by a smart home. And so we really launched Yonomi with the idea that this is something that is relevant to everyone. Whether you have connected devices today or not, you certainly will. A year from now, 2 years from now, we all will, and increasingly higher numbers of those devices. And so as we ourselves were starting to live with these things, we said, boy, these are really cool, but it's going to kind of suck for a lot of users because it has really the potential to actually complicate your life. And what the smart home should really do is simplify. And so we came up with this notion that, hey, if we took this agnostic approach that allowed us to work with essentially every connected device that might come into the home and coordinate them together so that the end result is, one, simplicity, and two, value to the user that is where in the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so we set about doing that. There's a lot of hard problems to solve in there: user experience problems, technology infrastructure problems, connectivity issues, automation, global scale, lots of really fascinating hard problems along the way. But we've been chipping away at it, iterating on it. I like to say that we've been through 1,000 iterations on this platform at this point in time, and are feeling pretty good about where we are, but still so much left to do.
Yeah. And your experience there kind of mimics my own, in that we've had several different swings at what I would call home automation. I mean, before IoT became the buzz phrase that it is.
Absolutely.
And going all the way back to the old BSR X10 things, and then early Z-Wave stuff, and every time you add one of these things, you find out that it's a part of a solution, but it's not an entire solution, and the entire solution doesn't exist or is hellaciously expensive and only designed for mansions, or this sort of thing. So before we get into something specific about Yonomi, how do you use it? Describe for us your household circumstance and how it impacts your day.
Well, that's a good one. So I'll say that I live in a household with my wife and our 3 daughters, and so we use it quite a bit. So the first thing that I did as we were starting to prototype Yonomi is I said, I want this thing to manage the lights, because with kids, the thing that they always do is leave the lights on in the rooms, wherever they go. They just are totally unconscious about it. And though I did for many years to educate, to encourage children to form good habits about turning on and off lights, I failed at it basically with my kids. So I automated it all. And I have the lights basically turn themselves off in their bedrooms as the kids leave the house. And if they kind of leave little reading lights and closet lights on when they go to sleep at night, once they're asleep, the lights automatically go off. So that's quite a convenient thing. And then music, it turns out, is a pretty important part of our family as well. And so we use Yonomi to automate the music experiences too. As people arrive home, music kind of starts coming on and playing. And increasingly over the past couple of years, well, really the past year, using voice as an interface for a lot of our home experiences really become a big deal. As we've integrated with Amazon Echo, we use the Alexa service basically to turn on and off routines. And so the kids now use that more than anything else. Yes, they're the automated things that automatically turn off the lights for them, but when they actually want to start controlling music, turn on television, or just kind of turn on everything in a room like the living room, they can just use that with their voice now. And we've got the little cheap Echo Dots all over the house, and you can just say, Alexa, turn on the living room TV, and it just comes on, and the lights dim, and the music mutes while we do that. So those are the kind of ways. Oh, the last one I'll say is my kids come and go, take themselves, to and from school and their various activities right now. The other thing they wouldn't remember to do for sure, and plus I don't even want to give them house keys anymore because I know they'll lose them. The doors just automatically lock when they leave. so they will never forget to lock the door on their way out. It just happens for them automatically.
Boy, I'm going to come back around to that because I have some questions about that. We've kind of, it sounds like we're sort of, I'm maybe a number of steps behind you down a similar path, having integrated these things. But before we get, I guess before we dive down into all the minutiae of that, shall we take a brief look at Yonomi to see what it is? And I'll sort of give my little outline, and then I'm curious about some of the design decisions that you've made. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep looking at you, but I'm going to change my shot to actually take a look at my Nexus 7 tablet, which now, Randy, would you be able to make that the focus briefly? If you're still about.
It is. Oh, this one. Yeah, you have a couple. Okay.
Yeah.
We're there.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is a live shot of my Nexus 7. You can see what I got going on here, and I have the Yonomi app running, and I only have a few. I've only been using it for a few weeks, so I only have a few little presets in. And basically, you know, I have it set to turn the office lights on, and if I 1 second, if I put myself down here, you can actually see all this stuff happening. Now, the interesting thing about this to me is, first of all, I have to give kudos to Stacy Higginbotham for actually tipping me to you guys, because I was venting a bit about IFT. If you're going to have IoT stuff, you will probably explore IFT at some point, because it's quite useful and it's free and whatnot. The problem with it is it's super simplistic, and that simplicity is both its, you know, it's a benefit and a curse, because 3 minutes after you programmed your first one, you find out there's no if, this, then, and, or, else, and
Exactly.
So that's where Yonomi came in, and so the ability to do things like you know, office. You see, there's a thing that says office lights on. That sends a command to my Wemo smart lights controller. Also a source of great frustration, by the way. The Wemo stuff, not wonderful. The Philips Hue stuff, much more wonderful. But then the ability to say, Alexa, turn off the office lights. And have her answer back, and the office lights go out, and it's by room, and we actually put this to great use, including a bit of Yonomi stuff for Halloween this week, where we had we had a bunch of Philips Hue programmable color stuff going on. In any case, so there are some things here. These are my presets. These are all of the different lights and devices. Then there are the different routines, I guess, and there are a whole bunch of neat ideas for things that you can do. I mean, I just haven't had a chance to look at all of this yet, but incoming phone calls causing lights to happen, geographic stuff. What's the reaction to the fact that you're running this on a mobile device and that it might not be at home? How does that work? How are people responding to that?
Well, there's a few ways to sort of talk about that. You know, the mobile device obviously is the most accessible thing. Everybody's got one. And so in some ways, that's the most natural platform to use to engage users and to, leverage that as infrastructure in the home that can deliver messages. Now, the vast majority of at least mainstream connected devices today have both local interfaces and cloud interfaces. And so we've built into Yonomi some intelligence that says, hey, you know, we can send the message to those lights, in this case, via Philips Hue, you know, either on a local network or through the cloud, whichever one is sort of more performant and available at that particular time. But there are a handful of devices, and Wemo is among those, that we have no cloud interface for. So we can only access it on a local network. And that's where the issue of using the mobile device as a relay, as a gateway for those devices can be problematic, because if that device is not on the local network, if it has either left the house or run out of batteries or whatever, or dropped Wi-Fi, then commands to like a Wemo might not work. And so that is problematic for some users. The thing that we recommend to people in that instance is, if you have a device like a tablet, for instance, which doesn't leave the house all that often, tends to stay plugged in, then that is a natural thing to use as your virtual gateway. So we suggest leaving those things on the home network if you have those types of local devices that you want to be able to control, even if your mobile phone is out of the network.
Honestly, Yonomi has been kind of transformative in our use of some of these things, and it's been a good enough experience that I would consider purchasing like a little Chromebook or something that can run Android things to just stay, to be a fixed install, because there was a point I had a sort of a false start down a system that was from a company called Mia Casa Verde. They called it a Vera. Came from the same sort of energy management, home automation stuff, but was maybe a few years ahead of the curve. And it basically looked like a little router. And so I could see, a little Chromebook with Yonomi running on it, sitting in the family room or something like that as a fixed part of the install would be a very worthwhile enterprise. On the other hand, it's been interesting to have Yonomi installed on a couple of devices, some that leave the house and some that never do, and to see how it's handed off. I have a couple of questions about this. One is, to what extent is this locally executed logic versus cloud executed logic? How does that, what's the sort of dividing line there? If my internet access went down in some cases and everything's local, would anything work?
In terms of the automations, the automation engine, the rules engine, actually does run in the cloud, and there's reasons that that's sort of necessary, really. And so, if you fully lost connectivity to all your devices when the internet went down, then those Yonomi automations would not work. Now, there are some ways, obviously, for us to push some of that capability more towards the edge, so it could run locally on your tablet or some local gateway device that you have running in the home, and can still reach out and connect to some of those local devices. But still, as I mentioned, it's a mishmash what types of connectivity each of these products use, and some of those products are not controllable at all if the internet goes down. So it's going to be at best an incomplete user experience if and when the internet goes down.
Okay, and now you guys control just a range of devices. I mean, I have some promo goods from the Honeywell thermostat, and you're brilliantly good at finding devices. What are sort of the underlying mechanisms there, or have there been any particular speed bumps along the way to dealing with the all the different things? Because there are what, 60 or 70 that you now deal with, and
yeah, that's right. That's right. There are, and we're adding new ones all the time. And yeah, we encountered this challenge very early on as we were getting started, because we didn't start with the idea like, okay, let's narrowly connect to some sort of known, well-vetted ecosystem with an open, API or SDK or whatever. We took the approach of, okay, what are the 5 or 10 most popular connected devices in the home today? And let's go figure out how to connect with all of those things. And of course, they were all over the map in terms of the sort of interfaces and the connectivity style and the security schemes that they used and everything else. So they were, Sonos, Nest, Philips Hue were among the first, and Wemo. right? So they all do things vastly differently. And so that forced us from the very beginning to design an architecture that could, one, successfully discover devices from all of those different types of vendors, different types of connectivity schemes and security schemes, connect to them, and then automate them. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought up very specifically the discovery piece of it, because I think that's a very unique capability in Yonomi, and that's because we viewed that from day one as being an essential part of the user experience. That you, the user, don't have to really think, and do your own self-inventory of what are the things that you have, and then go about, sort of connecting them into Yonomi. We're there to simplify your life, and it's a much better user experience if we can just tell you, oh, we see that you have these 3 things, and here's how you can connect them to Yonomi. And within, a couple of simple steps, literally, a couple of minutes, have them all connected and your first routine or automation running with them. So it was really quite challenging.
And the differing security models is particularly of interest to this crowd, because we have kind of come to the realization that security is once again an afterthought in a lot of circumstances. And I don't want some script kiddie flashing my lights all day long. And I know some that might do it just for fun, Mr. Bodie, from halfway around the planet. So it's interesting for sure. Do the manufacturers, do they take any feedback? Do they? Is it a bi-directional street? Are you able to work with them and help them to improve their customer experience as well as your own?
In some cases, yes. As you can imagine, they all are different, and all are sort of interested in collaboration and feedback, some more than others. But yeah, with a number of these partners, we are able to work really very closely and collaborate on what the user experience is and what's really going to make it smoother, better, more satisfying, more reliable, more secure, all of those things. And so, yeah, it is all over the map. I mean, some of these partners, are very passive. They say, here's our interface API, go use it. Don't call us, basically, if you don't have to. And other people really want to have very frequent collaborative conversations with us about what we're learning on this side, what challenges we've had, bugs. Some of them are very anxious for us to discover bugs or other issues that they have, and really react very well to that. And likewise, we like that to be bi-directional. But it is all over the place. As you mentioned, we work with a ton of different companies, and so they all have their own personality.
Yeah, I'm interested. One of the things I'm specifically interested in, then I'll open up to some of these guys for questions of their own. What are you able to accomplish with Sonos? And let me preface, I have no experience of Sonos, and I'm somewhat averse a little bit to certain things about their product range, if only because I have one of their predecessors widely installed, and it would be exorbitantly expensive to switch them out. So I'm sort of looking in another direction, but I'm interested to know sort of how far it goes, how deep you're able to go into their operating environment, as it were.
Yeah, we can do quite a few things with Sonos, and we have found that it is, I think it remains, I mean, at least in the top 2 or 3 most popular devices that we see in homes today. And moreover, the people who do have Sonos are absolutely passionate about Sonos and typically about music. So they really care about the integrations. We get a lot of feedback from Sonos users and from Sonos themselves. I mean, they're really a great company, very innovative, and they are extremely passionate about user experience. And so we do some really interesting things, and I think Sonos was quite surprised early on when we went to them and kind of showed them some of the prototypes we were working on of things that we were doing that they I think it really wasn't on their roadmap of things that could probably be done with their products. So, so we can do certainly a lot of the basic things. We could have your Sonos players, play, pause. We can have you select music from your Sonos favorites and include that in a routine that fires automatically when you come home, or that you can run via your voice from Amazon Alexa. And things like that, skip track, mute, various things. But what we added to that was ability to do announcements as well. So we can on the fly generate text to voice types of announcements and stream that directly to your Sonos. So this is useful for alarms and reminders and things like that. I have one taken personally because I famously forget to set out the trash and recycling curbside on Monday mornings. So my Sonos, at 7 o'clock in the morning when I'm typically in the kitchen Sonos will just come on and says, "Kent, remember to set out the trash today." So that's kind of a useful thing. But then the other thing that became possible once we started to automate this, and you mentioned it briefly, at least it's available on the Android platform. Our iOS users are anxious to get this as well, but there's some limitations in the operating system that don't make it possible yet. But our ability to actually pause or mute music when you get a phone call. So that's an incredibly useful feature to not have background music playing. If it was blaring, you don't want to have that when mom calls or your boss or whomever, to have that mute temporarily while you're on the phone, and then as soon as you hang up, it comes back on. That's an incredibly nice style of automation.
Yeah, very interesting. And I wonder if that would, so that's obviously possible on the mobile platform. I wonder if one could trigger that via something that wasn't necessarily native to the mobile platform. That's a different thing. I'm reminded of, the way a TiVo, there used to be a module for TiVo that would show the caller ID of an incoming phone call on the screen while you were watching your TV, which is a similar kind of integration. That was, although early on and simplistic. Let me open the floor to some of these other fine gentlemen who are also active in this space in different ways, and see if they have any questions to ask. Bear in mind, James, I don't see where you're pointing at specifically. I presume you're pointing at Tim.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tim. So I'm curious about, I'm interested in IoT protocols, so I'm really fascinated about how you do the discovery. What are you allowed to tell me about that, and how much of it's trade secret?
Well, what we can say is that we sort of use this constellation approach to sniffing out and detecting the various devices that you have in your home, associated with your phone and everything. I mean, they're all essentially open things, but how you put those together so that it creates a cohesive user experience, and you can see them one by one popping up as you launch the application, is the sort of magical part from the user experience. So yeah, I probably won't get really deep into it, but it number of different things that we can scan, search for, and whatnot. And then there's some amount of processing, because you get a lot of noise in that signal that you need to clear out of things that are totally irrelevant to what we're actually looking for. And you can kind of find those needles in the haystack.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm still left with some questions, but never mind. So that's interesting. And you also talked about the ability to talk directly to devices if they offer that interface. So like if something's on your Wi-Fi and it has a direct actionable interface, then you'll use that optionally, or you'll go via the cloud. How does that, like, to what extent does the user get to control that, or is that your decision, or does it vary on a network state? How does that map? I mean, it seems to me like a hard problem, so I'm fascinated to know how you solved it.
Yeah, it is a hard problem indeed. I mean, in many cases, there really isn't necessarily a choice to be made. You know, we can figure out what state everything is in, and like, okay, the only way this particular device is accessible at this particular point in time is via local thing, so we'll send it that way. Or we may say, oh, the only channel we have to this other device is through the cloud, so we use that. So I mean, you know, many times it's extremely simple. There's only one choice. But moreover, you know, we are trying to be able to, especially as we move forward, detect whether or not there are multiple paths to deliver messages, and figure out which are going to be the most reliable, performance, et cetera. And that can be done really on the fly. And so the question about, does the user really get to choose that? To some degree, yes, but I think in real-time operations, if there are multiple paths, you don't want necessarily the user being involved, because that's an interruption. You know, I have to ask them, you know, their opinion on essentially network routing isn't going to be a great user experience, and obviously it's going to be very slow. But the user can affect that by saying, you know, I'm going to enable essentially the cloud interface for Yonomi and not the local interface, or vice versa.
Okay.
So it would force it in that case. Like, I'm not going to give you the option. It's always going to be this.
So this cropped up, and it's not a home automation case, but cropped up for me the other day when I was trying to download a TV program to watch on the train, and the app decided that because I wasn't on Wi-Fi, it wasn't going to let me. Now I know that there's like 3 gig left in my bundle, and I have to use it I've got till tomorrow to use it, and I'm on LTE, and the only available Wi-Fi was cruddy Starbucks. It's like, you know, I know what I want to do here, guys, but the app knows best. So I'm curious to like how far you've gone to avoid that sort of issue. I mean, I guess with the home automation, it makes less difference because, you know, latency apart, provided the message gets there, then, you know, the kettle will still switch on at roughly the right time. And so I'm kind of not down to the microsecond. So I guess it doesn't, a lot of use cases, it doesn't matter so much. But
sure.
But yeah, no. So do you kind of let the user at least express a bulk preference about how this device would get got at?
Yeah, we do. You know, there actually aren't that many devices today that will give you the multiple options to do it over local and a remote network. But say Philips Hue, for instance, is one of those.
Right.
And so you as a user have the ability to connect your cloud Hue account to Yonomi, your local hub interface to Yonomi, or both.
And you have some way of aggregating those so that you know that they're talking about the same devices somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Because the ID of the individual bulbs themselves are always unique. Okay. So even if we see them through different channels, we know that they're the same thing.
So do you, I mean, you may choose not to answer this, but what's your feeling on the damage that the recent security brouhaha about the webcams and denial of service on Dyn and stuff like that? How much damage has that done to the perception of the Internet of Things for home automation?
Well, that's a hard one because I think it did damage in a couple of different dimensions. I mean, I think one, people who are sort of watching it closely and seeing that, oh, these are quote unquote Internet of Things devices that have been co-opted to launch these types of attacks. Like, that's a pretty alarming thing, and that casts some sort of a cloud over connected devices. But I think most people who weren't actually paying attention to the details of that particular attack, their experience, was one in which there were a number of services, including their connected devices, that were unavailable for that Friday, right? Because of that attack. And so just they had a crappy user experience that day. So it certainly hurts things. I think it's been correctly pointed out by a number of folks close to this space is that the typical smart home devices that most people have really were in no way involved in this particular thing. These are kind of older style security cameras, maybe in commercial environments and whatnot, not necessarily home things. But it's definitely a warning of things to come. I think each time we have one of these, my sincere hope is that vendors, and I'm one of them, we don't sell any devices, but we certainly have service that's relative to this, that every time this happens, everybody learns a little bit more, gets smarter, and our ability to defend against or preempt these types of things in the future increases, because nobody wins if we're in a position where these types of bad events can happen on a frequent basis.
I think one of the risks that kind of people in the world I hang out in were worried about is that it will invigorate the regulators to perhaps regulate things prematurely before the market's really settled. And specifically for me, the worry is that they may cast in stone particular practices as being the right way to do things before this market is sufficiently mature for that to be even a prudent thing to do, let alone a good thing to do. So that was my perception. Do you think I'm hanging out with the wrong people, or do you think that's a fair comment?
No, I do think it's a fair comment. I absolutely do. I think that regulators are famously overreactive. I don't want to say overreactive. I mean, they play an important role in this, and it can be very positive. But the potential is there for them to overreact, and the consequence of overreaction in this space could really mute innovation. I think that's the concern that you're surfacing, and I share that. We are at early stages in some ways, and we want a lot of people experimenting, getting things out there and getting a lot of user feedback. Yes, you need to be responsible. You need to use best practices, everything else. Don't be stupid about it. But also, I think the products and the services that are going to be really transformative for our space, are still being invented right now. And if those are overly burdened right now, it could really have a dampening effect on innovation.
And kind of following on from that, Michael, interrupt if I'm going on for too long, but following on from that, I mean, you probably don't want to name specific companies, but have you seen onboarding experiences that are quantitatively better for users than other onboarding experiences? Because I mean, there's a huge variation in the way that you sign even your light bulb up. You can buy the same technical product, a light bulb, and the way that you sign it up to the world is utterly different from every device. And do you have a feeling that there are good, that there will be, I'm trying to think of the word you said, best practice, that there will be an evolved best practice for that will come out of it? And do you already see it?
Yes, I think there's a lot of innovation going on in this space, and there's some of it that I can't talk about because it's because it's still under development and very much under NDA. There are people have been sort of wrestling with best ways to onboard new devices out of the box, right? You get that light bulb and you plug it in, and then how do you get it connected to the network and authenticated with you and share it with other people who are relative to you? That there are something, some people do that better than others, as you've pointed out. Some of them do it in a way that is just absolutely painful to users, especially mainstream users would not tolerate. But I think even the best practice as it is today will, within a short period of time, probably within the next year or two, be completely replaced with new methods that would make that much easier for mass market consumers and actually much more secure. So I think there's some really brilliant things coming down the pike in that regard that I think will have a huge impact on the acceptance of these types of devices by mass market users.
Cool. I have an interest in this space. I'm working on a thing in that area, so I'd be fascinated to see how that evolves, and maybe we get to talk about it at some other point, but not in this environment, I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question, because what we're talking about with Hue and Wemo and all the different sort of things these are consumer space, and your earlier effort in being in all the energy management stuff seemed to be maybe spanning consumer space and industrial space, maybe a little more. And I think consumer IoT and industrial IoT are very different things. So which sort of begs the question of, okay, beyond things that are on my network, there are things that are not on my network, but if I'm running a factory using some of this, or do you see an opportunity there for some of this same sort of activity, but relative to industrial process automation or monitoring or any of these sorts of things? Because it seems like the underlying fundamentals are similar, even if the devices are different.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the underlying fundamentals of attaching to lots of device data streams that are sensors and actuators that are in an environment that need to be coordinated together by some sort of automation, intelligence engine, and everything else. Those high-level concepts are exactly the same. I mean, the home, is maybe a somewhat simpler version of a factory, but the concepts and the technologies at the end of the day are very, very similar underlying all of this. We've chosen very consciously to start by focusing on residential and have remained focused on that. I mean, there are some partnerships we're working on that are sort of pulling us into small commercial types of things, not really industrial, but more small commercial things. But the reason that we focused on that was for a few reasons. One, and Michael, I think you said this well at the beginning, home automation has sort of been around for a while. It's gone through a few iterations, but really never made it beyond essentially the 1%, right? The more wealthy people, or just super dedicated geeks, right? That's who really did that. So the opportunity for smart home, we try not to even use the term home automation anymore because it's so burdened, I think. But the opportunities for smart home is really greenfield. Nobody owns that. There's not an incumbent there. And there's lots of opportunity for innovation and kind of finding the right path there. That's why, it was so exciting for us as engineers and innovators and entrepreneurs, is that, hey, you don't see any of these, or you don't see very many of these greenfield, potentially global scale opportunities very often. So that's neat. When it comes to commercial industrial for IoT, the opportunity is clearly massive. Massive. Probably the dollars spent on that, in the coming years is going to massively outpace the home. But there are a lot of incumbents in that space who have been doing some form of automation for buildings and factories and industrial organizations for a long time. My opinion is that there's a lot of disruption that should and could be done in that space. But you're going to have
Johnson Controls could buy you.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's either it'll get, innovated from the inside by somebody who's already a big player in that space, or somebody new will come and completely disrupt it as a brand new brand. And I'm not sure the way that'll go, but for the time being, we want to stay focused. We're a small company. We can't do too much, and so let's try to make the home experience great.
And that's so. Moving forward, before I hand off to James, who has his own question, is that what's the end game for you guys? Do you want to be the big company, or do you want to sort of shake the foundations of others, or do you see an opportunity to on-ramp into a greater resource base at some point?
Well, you know, I mean, the one truth about startups, of which we are very much one, is that you know, it's a fallacy that you can have the long-term plan. You know, basically you're playing the cards that are dealt you, and the cards change every day. And in this space where there's just a ton of activity going on, and there will continue to be, the cards are going to look very different a year from now than they look today. All we focus on is what we focused on from day one, which is how do we make the user experience simpler and better with the connected home. We think that that is today starting to be, and will in the future very much be, a massive scale global opportunity, and we want to be right in the middle of that. And so, hey, if we can make a run at that on global scale as a standalone company called Yonomi, that's great. If we can partner up with somebody who already has a very large reach, that's exciting too. But either way, you know, that vision, we're not going to let go of it. You know, the vehicle, if it changes, so be it. But that's the thing that you know, I think we're all committed to focusing on for the rest of our careers.
Okay, thank you for that. And now I'll hand off to James, who's been waiting patiently.
I have. Yeah, Kent, I can get very excited about where we can take services like Yonomi going forwards. I think your emphasis so far has been on household objects, but I'm just thinking about what you can do if you can interface into other services like mobile phone networks. So there's so much you can do interacting with these mobile devices, and doing things like, for example, turning up the temperature in the house when my wife is I don't know, 5 kilometers down the road. So when she arrives, comes in through the door, and the temperature is just perfect. Or even the alternative scenario is when she's 1 kilometer down the road, all the lights start flashing red and the sirens go to warn me. Useful. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the communications bits and pieces you can do as well. And there's a lot that can be done there. Sorry.
No, I completely agree. And we view from day one, we view that the mobile devices that you carry around with you, or sometimes wear on your wrist or whatever, are absolutely IoT devices that are your personal. You know, we use the term smart home because that evokes the right way for people to think about it, but it's bigger than the home. You're absolutely right. It's that thing that you carry in your pocket, which is a bundle of sensors that tells us a lot of information, and that right now is being used to trigger location events like the ones that you mentioned about arriving home or leaving home. They, in some cases, can be used in the way that I mentioned before, which is to pause the music that's playing on my Sonos speakers when I get a phone call. That's pretty useful. We think that automobiles obviously are important bundles of sensors that are relevant to what your current context is, and how your life can be automated based on what your car can tell us is going on. And so, yeah, it definitely goes outside the home. And moreover, you know, when you show up at the office, like I do now, you know, certain things should trigger that says, okay, well, the environment at my office now changed because I'm here, or it changed because I left, or it changed because only one person is here and not, you know, 20. And so, location, mobile devices, wearables, and vehicles are all an important part of that mesh of sensors that help hopefully make our lives better.
Yeah, so much to do, isn't there? And,
There's so much to
and,
do.
and another area which you haven't mentioned in your big list is this business of management and identity and security. So you take scenarios like the Airbnb scenario where you open up your home to somebody for a couple of days. They come into your house and you want to give them control of your IoT devices, but only for the weekend. So that they can turn the lights on and off and open the door and not be attacked by the robotic vacuum cleaner, that sort of stuff. But then after the weekend, you want to take those permissions back, and you probably want to have a look at an audit trail to see what people have been doing with your objects. That might be quite useful. And then if you're really smart, you could probably then, if you've got a ledger system, then build in a cryptocurrency for settlement. So if you can turn the lights on, but if you turn the electric heater on or the air conditioning, you pay for it. Thought. All these things that can be done in the future, but there's a long way to go yet, I think.
There is, but yeah, I think a lot of the core concepts that you're talking about, James, are very much in focus for us right now. They're very real. I think that Airbnb scenario is a real one, or just one in which you have house guests. I remember, my parents having, all the different remote controls, and they would have a list, for anybody who would come, they would house guests, people just kind of come over like, okay, if you need to operate the TV, do this and that and that. And I think that we can, for any sort of house guests, be able to surface, things like that, useful things that says, okay, just use your voice to say, turn on the TV.
Yeah, well, is that how you do it at the moment, using Amazon voice services?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Create your routines that know how to command your things and turn on your scenes, essentially, for the TV room or what have you.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that you've got no form of authentication. So a burglar comes in, he can control all your objects.
Well, so there are more pieces that are coming to that I think are going to make sure that those things are still only granted to the people who should have them granted. Yeah. I mean, physical access is one of those filters.
That's right.
Of course.
Door locks under voice control, for example, is a bit of a no-no, really, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, locking them in most cases is going to be an okay thing. It's the unlock that is the tricky bit. So there's a lot of extra, multi-factor things that are being added to that to make sure that it's only the people who should be able to do them can.
Good stuff. That's the worry about door locks that keeps my wife and I from going down that path, is the idea that it's a little less deterministic about how access is granted. On the other hand, I would like to see there's some more evolved things that I'd like to see. For example, we have some surveillance cameras that watch the front of our property because we primarily park on the street. I would like to have the ability to know when our vehicles are on the street, and sort of, when a vehicle leaves, just log that out or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's an outfit called Sighthound that does that. But anyhow, I think it's fantastic and fascinating, and we're coming to the top of the hour. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
And we haven't even done a demo, Michael, have we?
Well, I was going to do a demo if you would like to. For example, I've been tinkering. You can see that I've been tinkering. My little thing here about turning on the office lights, these light bulbs that you see before you now are the Wemo lights. And so, and I've got, just a second here, I've got my little, well, that's not the best video I could possibly show, but I've got my Amazon Dot here. So we could say, Alexa, turn off the office lights. Alexa, turn off the office lights.
Okay.
And so she does her thing. It runs the opposite sequence of this, which is to turn on or off these 5 light bulbs. However, let's look at some of the slightly more advanced ones that they show within their samples here in the app. This is a nice part about the app, is that it gives you some examples for, say, for a wake up. If you go in here, and it's just going to look at the different devices that I have. Let's see here. We go at 7 a.m. a wake up, turns a bunch of lights on, sets the Nest thermostat to 72, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I would probably remove a bunch of those, but the ease of use thing is, if you look at these light bulbs, you can, I don't know, you can see this, I'm going to do it this way. If I want to remove that light, I just do that. I want to remove that light, I just do that. If I want to change its functionality, I just say, no, turn off, toggle, dim to arbitrary percentage. And if I'm talking about a colored light, I have various different things like set color to random or set color temperature specifically. A flash. I mean, this is just so easy to use. It's so easy, even a caveman could do it. And then you simply type, tap on the little check mark in the upper corner, and you've got a new routine then that does things relative to your house. And if we're starting from scratch, the interesting thing is this: when, and you say, okay, when at a time. Let's call it at that time, that's fine. Then add an action. I'm going to say, to that colored lamp, turn it off, but only if it's Wednesday or it's the weekend. So on the weekend at that time, turn that lamp off. Boom, boom, boom. Very easy to do. That alone is at least one step beyond what IFT can achieve. The one thing I would ask, Kent, is in this conditional stuff, if I had a motion sensor, is it possible to say only do this if there's no motion in that space, if that sensor's been idle? So I'd like to know if don't do it if the room's occupied. That's what I'd like to know.
Right. So microlocation is a little bit difficult. So motion is an interesting thing, and there's a couple of different motion sensors we work with today, but there's going to be more in the future, which are I think a bit smarter. But so I think right now for the conditional part of the logic, we don't have, but only if there's no motion. But I think we do can use motion sensors as triggers in that. So this is, oh, if you see motion, then do this, or if you see no motion, then turn everything off. And so you can sort of approximate that use case, but yeah, the devices are still catching up a little bit with some of those use cases.
Okay. And the one device that I have that I can't use with it that I would like to, I'll just add as a suggestion, is the NetAtmo weather station.
Oh yes, we get a lot of those requests.
They have, we like them for their ability to track data, and they have something that isn't so common. They have a good sound meter in them, so you can say, if you hear a noise, then do this, and that's quite lovely. So, hey, we're coming to the end of our hour. I'll ask these guys for one more round of questions. We also have a handful of people listening on our audio conference bridge. Kent, if we've missed anything, if there's some key insight you think, oh, Andy, go man.
Yeah, I have a question. It has to do with Bluetooth Low Energy and NFC, and how you interface those things in. I mean, it's particularly the reason for the question really is that you said that when your daughters leave the house, the whole house locks up. So clearly there's got to be a way of detecting them leaving the house. So how do you do that?
Well, in their case, it's their phones. They carry their phones with them when they go to school, and so that's a trigger for their leave home routine.
Okay, but have you done anything with interfacing BLE and NFC in?
So NFC directly, no. A number of the devices that we work with today are using BLE, but not for necessarily micro-location or any kind of location types of events. But we see that coming. We see that I think one of the great for smart home is microlocation, knowing whether or not there's somebody in that room. Now, motion sensors are useful, but BLE can be quite useful too, especially in identifying who that person is, right? And so we see some products coming in that actually have BLE, say, in the light switch, and being able to detect who's in the room, and using that as one of the triggers into automation. So I think we'll see that coming today. Yonomi ourselves aren't using that, but I think in a very short period of time we will be.
Well, hopefully, in the very near future, if some people have their way, you'll have your own domestic LTE femto cells in there, and the femto cells are actually very, very good at doing high precision location, sub 1 meter accuracy we're talking about. And the other great thing about that is that you can uniquely identify the endpoint, so you can see exactly where Andy is in his house, for example. I'm sure he tracks me.
Well, this, from an automation standpoint, that's incredibly useful stuff. So yeah, that's exactly what has been anticipated and contemplated for smart home for a while, and I think what our engine is going to be able to take good advantage of.
Yeah. And if I can back this down just for a second, we're almost at the end, and if anybody has gotten this far and is watching the video or has been listening live or watching all this far, I think it would be good to say, what is the minimum amount of equipment you need and software? So you get the Yonomi app either on the iOS, the Apple App Store, or the Android the Google Play Store, I'm sure. What is the minimum setup you'd need? I happen to have a Tribi here. And so do the other guys, I think, a couple of them. You need either the Amazon Echo, or what other equipment if you don't have anything, what should you go out and buy that to give you a tape? I guess that's a better question.
Really one or more of the devices that we currently support, and they're on our website as well as in the app. You can see the supported devices. So it's yonomi.co is our website, displays all of those devices that we support today. So really just one or more of those things, and that's the minimum set, and a smartphone, obviously. It gets more valuable when you have two or more of those devices, for sure. As Michael sort of demonstrated, coordinating them becomes quite useful. So yeah, that's the minimum set. I mean, typically we see people starting with lights. It's such a popular, obvious thing to automate, that Philips Hue or one of the various other LifeX, whomever else, you buy one of those, and that's maybe the first thing that you start to coordinate. A lot of users come to us because they're Sonos users, and automating their music and home sound experience is interesting to them. But really, you know, many different device types today. Kind of the possibilities are endless with the types of things that you can do when you start automating things together. Clearly, having a voice interface like Amazon Echo or Echo Dot, it makes it even more useful. So not only can you automate certain things, but you can instantaneously request them via your voice. That's pretty useful.
By the way, I think as far as detecting a person or a presence in a room, it would actually be really good to be able to work with if there's been nobody for like 20 minutes or something like that, to cut off lights. Not the obvious, but hopefully that'll come.
Yep.
Anybody else, or are we going to the mature audiences? And before I leave, because I'm in the kitchen, Tim, I heard you. Ready?
Yeah, no, I have a question, which is kind of almost a meta question, which is, do I gather from the fact that you're centered around an app that you think that mobile web isn't the way to do any of this?
I'm not sure I understand the question about mobile web.
So do you think that there's any room for the mobile web as a way of controlling home devices, or do you think that's just a lost cause and everyone's always going to use an app to control their light bulbs or their stuff?
Actually, in terms of the app, yeah, the app for us is just a convenient vehicle to create a user interface for people to be able to, one, onboard and discover their devices, and two, set up routines, But for the most part, our expectation is that 95% of the time you are not pulling out your phone and launching an app to do things. You're doing those things will happen for you either automatically, or you can call them up via your voice or a wearable or something else that you can cause the actions to happen that you want to happen. And so the mechanism for delivering those messages, sensing those devices and everything else, I think, are manifold. It's not just Wi-Fi, and it's not just going to be through an app experience. I think there are other ways to skin that cat, and so mobile web, is as likely as anything else to be implicated in that.
Okay, thanks. I was interested in that space as well, so there you go. Thank you. And I now have a phone that's ringing, so.
Okay, Kent, thank you very much for your visit. It was excellent and very, very interesting. And I may actually get started in this stuff. I've been resisting.
Well, give it a try. It's kind of fun when you get going with it, and once you live with a little bit of automation, we find that people can't go back.
Right. And Michael, thank you. Anything final from you, Michael?
No, it was wonderful. We're off down this path. We think it's great. We no longer use IFT. We think Yonomi is wonderful, and to the extent that until it morphs into something else, we'll be using it happily. So,
perfect. Okay, with that, we're going to morph ourselves into the mature audiences only version, which just simply means that we will be off YouTube. I'm going to put this on as a last image for Periscope, and we're out of here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.